For gustatory or taste senses and olfactory or smell senses, what you're doing is, rather than converting vibrations or waves into an electrical signal, you are now converting directly chemicals into an electrochemical signal. Let's see how we do that. Gustation or taste is accomplished through what are called taste buds. You've probably heard of taste buds before. Many people think that those bumps that are on the surface of your tongue are taste buds. That's actually not correct. Those bumps on your tongue, that just physically that you can feel them, those are called papillae. The papillae are these larger structures, and then within them and between them, that's where you find taste buds. So I'll go back to that other image. Don't worry too much about that. But let's look at what this looks like. If we have the tongue on the left side here, and we have it covered in papillae, if we blow up one of those papillae look like, you see that center image. So you can see it's a bump, it's a large kind of membranous tissue. And in between those papillae, you have these crevices, these deep crevices that extend down deeper into the tongue. Well, if we look into those crevices and then we blow up those little bluish purple structures, those bluish purple structures are the taste buds. Those are the structures that convert chemicals into an electrochemical signal. So you can see, let's imagine that you're eating a piece of food. You eat a burger, all right? You put that burger in your mouth, you chew on it a bit, your saliva actually starts to digest that food. And as it's digesting that food, some of the chemicals of that food seep into the cracks between the papillae, and once in there, they can bind with these taste buds. You can see that there is a pore, a small hole that the chemicals can go through to touch that taste bud, and they first encounter gustatory hairs. Really, gustatory hairs are these cells, these kind of extensions from these cells that will convert the chemical into an electrical signal. And so that signal is sent through those taste fibers on the left side of the image. So you eat a piece of food, you start to digest it. The digested food seeps into those cracks between the papillae. It then goes into that pore, that opening, that then leads to a taste bud, and the taste bud converts the chemical into an electrical signal. So the taste buds are the sensory receptors, the papillae are simply the bumps. Now, if we talk about taste buds, it turns out that there are individual differences in the number of taste buds that someone has. Some people have very few, some people have an exceptional amount, up to 10,000 taste buds. And as you'd expect, the people who have a higher concentration of taste buds tend to have an easier time distinguishing really subtle flavors. I don't know if anyone has ever done wine tasting or beer tasting, depending on what age you are. But if you ever go wine tasting, one of the things that they will give you is this chart, which includes the many, many, many different types of possible flavors that exist within wine. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff here, like you can have a leathery taste, a coconut taste, something that tastes like sourdough versus eucalyptus, versus I think trash is in there somewhere. I know that there's a wet dog category. So there are these really weird, subtle tastes that you can get from wine. But you're probably really only going to be able to appreciate them if you have the taste buds to do so. Now, me personally, I never really got much out of wine tasting or beer tasting because I'm pretty sure I'm on the lower end of the spectrum here. I don't think I have very many taste buds. You put food in front of me, I eat it. Everything tastes good to me. So I think that I am not one of these, what are called super tasters. Super tasters have tons and tons of taste buds to differentiate different types of taste sensations. There are 5 basic taste sensations. You have sweet, which you're familiar with, sour, salty, bitter, and each of these has its own kind of specialized sensory receptor. We also have a flavor called umami. This is a flavor you're probably not familiar with unless you have a fair amount of Asian cuisine. This is a brothy flavor. If you ever eat miso soup, or you ever eat really any kind of soup that comes from an Asian food restaurant or that you make yourself using kind of Asian food ingredients, you'll probably get this flavor of umami. It's very, very common within Asian cuisine. Those are the 5 basic taste sensations. I like to mention this because it's very interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of miracle berries. These are not psychoactive drugs, so it's not like this is going to make you trip. But one of the things that these berries do is they come in little tablets that if you put it on your tongue and you let it dissolve on your tongue, it changes how your taste buds process certain chemicals. Specifically, when you dissolve these on your tongue for about an hour or so, just temporarily, anything that is sour or acidic is actually going to taste sweet. So you could bite into a lemon after dissolving one of these on your tongue, and that lemon would taste extremely sweet. Or if you had milk, or you had cream cheese, which has a slight sourness to it, that milk and that cream cheese will taste slightly more sweet. This is actually really cool. If you ever get a chance, I believe you can buy these on Amazon for something like 10 to 15 bucks. It's not expensive. And so you get these tablets, try them out. They're actually really fun. Try different foods. The only thing I would warn you of is that the reason things taste sour in the first place, that's kind of that aversive, like, oh, I just can't eat too much of that, I can't eat this whole lemon, is because you're trying to protect. Sourness prepares your body to not eat too much of something that is acidic. If you eat too many lemons, what that's going to do is give you an ulcer. It's going to kind of burn the lining of your stomach. So one of the risks of taking these things, of using these things, is that you may accidentally eat too many lemons or eat too much of something that's sour, and then you get gastric problems with your stomach. So the thing itself is not harmful, but just be careful of how much acidity you may be eating when you try this. Very fun. I highly recommend it. That's it for taste. For olfaction, this is smell. This is basically all that I want you to know, this one slide. How do we smell something? Well, if you look at the image here, you can see that we talked about the olfactory bulb before. The olfactory bulb is this particular part of the brain. It extends out from the hypothalamus, and it's really, really close to the nasal cavity. And what it does is it extends these hair-like structures down into that nasal cavity, which are called cilia. So you have cilia lining the upper nasal cavity. When you smell something, what you're doing is there are particles of whatever you're smelling within the air. So when you smell a hamburger or when you smell some soup, what you're doing is you're taking in particles of that soup. Those particles bind to the cilia, and then once they're bound to the cilia, they stimulate nerves within those cilia. Probably heard that, whatever, don't worry about it. So once they bind, they send those signals up, they go straight to the olfactory bulb, and then the olfactory bulb processes that sensation. So you smell it once the signals have reached the olfactory bulb. Again, this is a very quick, direct connection to your brain. Another, again, why they say that smell is closest tied to memory. It's because you don't really have to navigate much bureaucracy. You don't have to go through the entire nervous system. You take in, you smell something, it binds, sends the signal right away. One of the consequences of this, by the way, is when you walk into a bathroom and you smell something that you don't really want to be smelling, what's unfortunately actually happening is particles of whatever that is are entering your nasal cavity and binding to those hairs. So when you smell that, it's actually going inside of you. That'll be probably the most gross thing I tell you this entire class. Figure you should know, though. All right. Finally, let's talk about the somesthetic senses. First, what encompasses these are the skin senses. So we're really encompassing a number of different kinds of senses here, but they're all considered skin senses. We have touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. When you touch something, you actually have specific sensory receptors dedicated to converting touch, texture, what something feels like. If you run your hand across a desk, is it smooth or is it kind of rough? You have sensors specifically for that. When you press your hand against that same desk, now you have deeper sensory receptors that are deeper within your skin that detect that, oh, some force is pressing against my skin right now. The table is. That's pressure. And then you also have temperature receptors, which will tell you whether something is whether the atoms within something are relatively more spread out, meaning that they're hot, or the atoms are more densely clustered together, which makes cold. All right, then we have pain, and I want to linger on pain for just a second, because pain is something that everyone is going to deal with in their life, and it's important to understand how pain works. I want to go over what's called the gate control theory of pain. The basis of this theory is that pain is a warning system. If something is going wrong with your body, pain is going to put up a red flag and say, hey, you should pay attention to this. It's not certain that something is going wrong, but something may be going wrong, and so you should pay attention to it. Well, this is useful because it's going to redirect your attention to something that you possibly should pay attention to. The thing is, once you feel pain, your body doesn't want to continue to feel pain. For example, if you have an alarm system, if there's a fire, what will happen is there might be a fire alarm that goes off. And once that alarm has gone off, it's served its purpose. You don't want it to continue to beep, or you don't want, say, the siren at the volunteer fire company to continue to sound. You sound it, everyone knows, then you turn it off. Well, pain is designed in very much the same way. Your experience of pain, your perception of it, is controlled by the relative balance of excitatory and inhibitory pain neurons being activated. So let me give you a concrete example. You are running through the forest, okay? And you lacerate your leg against something. You start to bleed. There's a big cut up your thigh. If there's nothing else going on, that big cut is going to hurt really badly at first. And then as time goes on, maybe you bandage it a bit, maybe you do something, you are aware of it now, you'll notice that the pain tends to dull a little bit. You don't feel as much of it. What's happening is, at first there were tons of excitatory neurons saying, there's something wrong here, pay attention to this. Then over time, more inhibitory pain neurons activate, such that the pain dulls. It usually doesn't go away right away, because if something is an open wound, it needs to be tended to consistently. But you don't need to experience as intense pain. Another good example of this is, let's imagine you're running through that forest, but rather than nothing else going on right now, you're running away from a bear. A bear is right behind you. First off, I wouldn't recommend running from a bear. If you're really far away, yeah, get away. If you're really close to it, play dead, freeze, don't aggravate it. But imagine you're being chased by something. So you're running, and then you cut your leg against something. Chances are you will not feel that pain right away. You'll keep on running. And then once you're safe, you sit down, you realize, oh shit, I'm bleeding. What's happening there is, when you're running from something, the priority is you need to get away from that bear. So your body will actually not tell you that something has happened to you, that you have gotten an injury, because it's more important for you to focus on getting away than it is for you to focus on the wound. The wound can be taken care of later. So your experience of pain is controlled by the relative balance of excitatory and inhibitory pain neurons. That is the gate control theory of pain. This is also why, and this happens to be something that actually works, it's one of those kind of traditions where it turns out there's a lot of wisdom in it. Babying a wound or kissing it or rubbing it to make it feel better actually works. Touching someone, kissing someone is a very comforting thing, just bodily touch by another person. So if someone is in pain and then you touch them or you hug them or you kiss them, they will actually feel less pain because they're experiencing two sets of signals. This inhibitory pain signal from the kiss or the hug, and the excitatory signal from the cut itself or from the injury. So, you want to help someone who's in a lot of pain, show them love, hug them, be nice to them. It works. All right. Aside from touch senses, we also have what are called kinesthetic senses. If you play sports, you probably have a very well-developed kinesthetic sense. This is your sense of where your limbs are within space at any given moment. You probably noticed you don't need to be looking at your limbs to know where they are. You can close your eyes, move your limbs around, kind of move them from side to side, and you know precisely where your hand is within space. And if you are a sports player such that you, say, dribble a basketball a lot, you need to know where your hand is so that it catches the ball. You tend to practice this sense, you develop it. This also helps with hand-eye coordination, knowing where your hand needs to be at any given moment to catch a ball. That's your kinesthetic sense. And then you have your vestibular sense. This is your sense of balance. I said we'd come back to the inner ear and these semicircular canals. Well, these semicircular canals are used for your sense of balance. They are fluid-filled sacs. And what this fluid does is, let's see if I can drain this bottle a little bit so I can give this example to you. All right, I might get messy here because I don't have my lid. But when I move this bottle, you can see that the water maintains that same balance. It's always straight even though the bottle is moving. Well, the same deal within your ear. When you have these fluid-filled sacs, if I move my head this way or that way, the fluid is trying to stay relatively even. So if it gets displaced, that means my body knows that something about my body has changed. The balance has changed. It's a lot like if you've ever done construction, you've ever used one of those levels where you have a little bubble in the center and then that bubble moves back and forth, and when you're trying to make something even or balanced, you want that bubble to be right in the center. The same with your semicircular canals. You're trying to maintain some amount of balance by making sure that fluid is level. This is also why you can get dizzy. What happens with dizziness is that, and there's a very good theory that helps explain this, is something called sensory conflict theory. The idea here is you will get motion sick when your vestibular sense does not match your visual sense. Think about what happens when you get dizzy. You spin around really, 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 really quickly. So if this is your inner ear and you spin around, what you're doing is you're moving the liquid like this. Now, as soon as you stop physically, but the water, this is kind of weird because the water is a little too full, but the water doesn't stop moving right away, it keeps moving. So when you spin around really quickly and then you stop, there is a mismatch between what your vestibular sense is saying, which is you are still moving, and what your visual sense is saying, you have stopped moving. When those are mismatched, you get motion sickness or you feel dizzy. This is why, say, some people can't, when they ride in a car, they need to look out. If you've ever sat in a car and you're reading a book, and you're reading it and then you start to get queasy, what's happening is there's a mismatch. Your visual sense is saying, I'm sitting here, I am still, and I'm reading a book. But your vestibular sense is very aware of the fact that you are hurtling through space. You are in a car going 60 miles an hour. So when there's that mismatch, you feel sick. That's sensory conflict theory, when your vestibular sense does not match your visual sense. All right, that's it for sensation. You now know how your sensory organs take in information and turn it into an electrochemical signal. Next week, we'll learn about what your brain does with that electricity once it has it.